the book of Genesis in 79 years at that rate. And I said, all right, thank you for that. I want you to know today we're going to speed it up by 50%. We're going to cover one verse today in verse 2. But do not despair, because next week we'll cover 3 verses. And so there will be an incremental speeding up. But I'm doing this intentionally because it is so important for us to understand our Creator and His creation process. I am so burdened for students and new believers who will say, you know what, this whole issue of evolution and creation, I just can't get over that. And so many can walk away from the faith, and I don't want that to happen. And so that's why we are going to do that. I was sitting in basketball practice yesterday, and I was trying to make my rounds and meeting all the different new parents. And I was sitting down with one parent who was reading the book, Reasons, written by Josh McDowell, and Reasons to Answer Skeptics With. And so I said, I love that book. And that book was very, very instrumental for me 30 years ago when I was a college student, and I was only about a year and a half old in the Lord, and I was being bombarded with all of these classes and teaching that God didn't write the Bible, and Moses didn't write the Pentateuch, and Christianity is only an assemblage of Near Eastern religions, and it's a hybrid of that with its Greek influences. And, you know, I didn't know how to respond to all of those things, and I was at a crisis of faith. And the ministry of Josh McDowell down at UC San Diego was so important. He came and he spoke on those topics. How do you stand on the authority, the inerrancy of the Bible, and how do you know the resurrection really happened? He spoke on those 2 messages, and they were exactly what I needed at this time when I wasn't going to walk away from the Lord, but I didn't know how to deal with those questions in an intellectual way and manner. And you know, I was just so grateful for that instrumental time of having those questions answered. So I hope in this series, as we go through understanding how we're created for a purpose, that we can understand the role of God in creation and how He did this so He could love us. He created us for a purpose. Today, we're going to talk about the chef and his ingredients. There are a lot of weird ways that people have read Genesis 1:1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, to the second verse. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And there's a lot of mystery, there's a lot of intrigue in terms of what is going on here, and there's been a lot of ways to think about it. The way that I like to think about it is through the imagery of cooking. And so when we think of the chef and his ingredients, you know, a lot of times for those of you who love to bake, you're going to get your baking powder and your eggs. I don't bake, so if I list the wrong ingredients, I apologize. But you get your eggs, and you get your sugar, and you get your flour, and you get all of these types of things, and you have them out in front of you, and so what? Each of those things, probably except for the sugar, doesn't taste really good all by itself. But when you mix it up and you go through the effort of blending it all together or mixing it all together, you know, I remember I was somewhere and someone was trying to bake a cake, and their electric blender wasn't working. So I remember saying, okay, I'll be your mixer. And so I remember hand mixing. What a tough job that is. You know, just trying to hand mix some of that batter to get it to the right consistency. But putting it all together, that will make a beautiful cake. But you have the ingredients laying out in front of you. It's not really anything yet. And when God created the heavens and the earth, He began by creating the ingredients, which is amazing enough. right? Because a lot of times the scientists are trying to see how life began. And so they're taking amino acids, and they're taking these chemicals, and they're taking this, and that. They're all trying to put it all together. They're shooting electricity through it and seeing if they can generate life. And, there might be a day where they've come close, but they're still using ingredients that have been made by God. They're not doing it out of nothing or ex nihilo. That's the amazing thing. Ex nihilo is the Latin term for out of nothing that God created. And so the very fact that God created his ingredients, even though it was without form and void, because he hasn't baked it together yet. He hasn't mixed it all together in a way that is going to be purposeful. He's going to do that over the next 6 days, and we're going to take our time looking at that. But it's a question of what we call cosmology. Cosmology, which is the study of the origin, nature, and order of the universe, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Now, you might say, wait, isn't that the study of putting on makeup? No, that's cosmetology. So, there's a difference between cosmetology and cosmology, but there's not a difference in the origin of its root word. Cosmos is the Greek word which means to arrange or to put in order. So when you're putting on cosmetics, a lot of times it's taking the face that may be out of order and then putting it in order with the right. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be insulting like that. But it's that kind of an idea. You're doing cosmetics in a sense to put things in an arranged package or to put things in order. And so that's the idea of cosmos, where you're putting things into order. You wake up in the morning and it's chaos. I cut my hair to a point, I don't care how it looks. I just want to wake up and I don't want to think about my hair. Right? I don't want to dry it. I don't want to comb it. I don't want to think about it. I'll just wash it. Right? But sometimes we wake up, and I remember when I had longer hair, back in the 70s. You'd have to, I always had to carry a comb with me, right? Because we thought it was cool to carry around the goodie comb when we were in junior high school. But you're always kind of doing this, and you're always, you're spending a whole lot of time in the mirror, making sure chaos is turned into cosmos. We're a mess, and we spend time in cosmetology to put things in order. Well, when it comes to the origin of the universe, similar to that. Now, it's interesting as we take a look at, what does America believe? What does our current population believe about creation versus evolution, where only 38% of college graduates hold to a 6-day creation? And it's interesting. I found this from a Barna research. I know it's kind of hard to read, but you go to Barna Creation Pastors, this will pop up. And it's the idea of the percentage of U.S. Protestant pastors that believe in a young earth creation or lean that way. And so the 35 and the 19% on top, the 19% are those who firmly believe in a young earth creation. And the darker 35% are those that lean that way but might give a little wiggle room for maybe the age of the earth. But they lean towards a 6-day literal creation versus progressive creation, theistic evolution. I'll talk about those in a moment. But it's interesting that there's a variety of beliefs out there. What's interesting is when we survey the landscape, and we're not going to dissect every theory today. We're going to do one theory today, and we're going to handle some of the major ones over the course of our time so that we can understand it. But we will get to them. But it's interesting that even the Vatican denies a literal creation. They believe that the 6 days is superstitious, and that comes out of the word of the Vatican astronomer, Guy Consolmagno, who declared the doctrine of God created the universe in 6 days as superstition, and at the end of the day is a kind of paganism, is what he says. But then, there's always been difficulties with the Roman Catholic Church and science, and we will uncover some of those controversies as we proceed too, because a lot of criticism that scientists have with church has to do with some of the foolish assumptions the Roman Catholic Church, which was the powerful church in the time of the Renaissance and the time of rationalism, made, for example, denying the fact that the sun is the center of the universe. They thought it was the earth, right? But the Bible talks about how the sun goes around and spins on its axis and does not believe in, the Bible does not teach an earth-centered universe. But it's interesting because there will be a variety of beliefs in evangelicalism. Some great scholars that I look up to as apologists will even have different views than I have. And I want you to know that if you believe in a longer age of the earth and things like that, that's not a test of fellowship. It's not a test of fellowship. Now, denying the Creator is, because if we deny that there is, if somebody says there's no Creator and someone says there is, that's a huge stark difference. But how things got there, it's not super clear. And I'm convinced, but there might be others who are convinced in other ways. And I want you to know that there are some really good people and brothers in the Lord, and by brothers I mean that generically, other people in the church that can have different views. But let me give you a summary of what those views are. I'm not going to dissect them all. I'm just going to introduce them today. All right, now, I personally hold to what's called the literal 24-hour day theory. And over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to share why I do. I believe God created the universe in 6 days. He's God. He didn't need more time. He could have done everything in an instant if he wanted to, but he had some other things he wanted to show man about work and rest. And so he did things, and you'll see the beauty of the 6 days as we go through them. This indicates an early earth. I'm not really sure how old the earth is, and I'm not scientific enough to think all of that out, but it does hold to an early earth, and that death occurred after Adam sinned. Another view is what's called the day-age view. The day-age view, also called progressive creation, and many evangelicals are it's not the dominant view, but more and more folks are biting into this. They will see that a day represents an undefined length of time. The earth, for them, could be billions of years, and so the creation week can be weeks of eras, right, or a week of eras, and creation days can be overlapping, and so that gives the possibility for them to have an old earth, and their creation periods overlap. But there's literal days where it's a 24-hour day, and then there's the day-age theory. Then there's another called theistic evolution. This is where God directed the whole evolutionary process to create the universe. So you're kind of combining God plus the theory of evolution and saying God was behind this theory of evolution. Somebody defined it this way: theistic evolution is matter plus evolutionary factors, that's chance and necessity and mutations and selection and isolation and death, plus the very long time periods, plus God, right? And so this is the idea of theistic God plus evolution, right? That's another major theory. Then there's the gap theory. Sorry, I had to do that. We don't want to fall into the gap. We don't want to do that. But the gap theory, and I'm going to speak more about this one today, this believes that between Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 and 2, that there are millions to billions of years between those two verses. There was a pre-Adamic race that was ruled by Satan. This is when Satan turned against God in Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28. And that God had to judge and destroy this race of people and recreate the universe. And they believe that what we read in Genesis 1 is a recreation of what was destroyed by God between Genesis 1 and 2. Right? Huge fairy tale, a lot of assumptions, but there are some biblical scholars, even the first edition of the Schofield Reference Bible held to the gap theory. Then there's the soft gap theory, which is kind of the gap theory, but not as hard. But it's they don't believe in there was a ruin or reconstruction, but there were long ages for the earth and universe, and that the earth the earth was dark for an indefinite period of time before God began creation. So the idea is that all the fossils and all the trees and all those things existed for a long time before God started that work of creation. Those have big, serious holes. There's another view called the continuous event view. This is where this believes in the long eras or periods, but yet they never stopped. So day one kept happening, and then day two started, and that kept happening. Day three started and kept happening. And so it's events that are continuously going on. There's another view called the framework view. This is where the days is not the key, but the week is the key to the metaphor. This is the idea that this is really focusing not on creation, they say, but on the analogy of work and rest, where God worked for 6 days and then rested. And so the idea is, don't get so hung up on this whole idea of creation. It's about imitating God in work. Now, there are some folks who really progress in this theory where they would see days 1 to 3 are called creation kingdoms. Day 4 to 6 are the creation kings. And then Adam is the king of the earth, and God is the king of creation, and they get really into it. But that framework theory has been well dissected as well. One last one is the analogical days view. And this is where the days and week is the analogy to the human work cycle. And so, the days can overlap. They're not seen as consecutive, but indefinite. But it's just that whole idea that it's an analogy, not about creation, but about our work and rest cycle. So those are some of the different views that Christians have held, and it takes a lot of reading into it. And the reason why they want to read into it is so that they can integrate scientific popular beliefs with their understanding of Genesis 1. And I am of the view, why don't we just take Genesis 1 for the way it reads? If we believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible, why don't we understand the Bible literally when God talks about creation? And so here's how I see it. Genesis 1:1 talks about the Creator. In the beginning, God created heavens and earth. Then he talks about the chaos when the earth is formless and void. Then he describes the creation, verses 3 to 31, 6 days of creation, and then the completion of it, where he rested in Genesis chapter 2. But there's all these different theories like, Genesis 1 was just a title, and then the real creation began in verse 2, or there's a gap between verses 1 and 2. That's all hogwash. That's a lot of reading into the text. Let's just take it for what it says. Verse 1 is about the Creator. Verse 2 is about the chaos. Verse 3 to 31 about the creation. And if we just read it simply, that's how it flows. So that's what we're going to talk about. I want to focus in on the elements of verse 2. And that the ingredients of the universe were created by the chef, where the earth was without form and void. Now, he already created, right? So verse 1, God created heaven and earth. Now, when he created heaven and earth, he created as ingredients that he was going to piece together over the 6 days. All right, so like the bakery chef has all their ingredients out there on the table that they're going to combine and they're going to put it together. Or like or like the omelet, right? You're going to have the eggs, and then you're going to slice your ham, and then you're going to have your cheese, and then you're going to put it all together for one wonderful Denver with eggs on the side and avocados too, right? Or it's like that